Welcome to a deep dive into, well, maybe the most fundamental question there is. What are we actually seeing when we look at the world?
It's a fantastic question.
Yeah.
We spend our lives assuming our eyes are like, I don't know, high-definition cameras just recording what's out there.
Exactly, like a perfect window onto reality. We take in raw data, objective facts, that's the assumption anyway.
But that's the first place we need to maybe pause and challenge things. Because our brains, they aren't passive recorders at all.
Okay.
They're incredibly active. They're meaning makers. Fiercely protective ones, actually. The reality we experience isn't raw footage. It's more like a carefully edited story.
Edited, how so?
Well, it's compressed, it's rearranged, it's a digest, really. We don't get the unfiltered world. We get a version designed for, well, ultimately, for survival, efficiency.
And this internal editor. It's seamless, right? We don't notice the cuts, the edits.
Not at all. It's brilliant, in a way. Think about that little language trick. If you see text like, I over you.
Right, you just read, I love you. Your brain doesn't stumble.
Exactly. It doesn't flag the errors.
Yeah.
It sees the pattern, the intent, the expectation, and it just corrects it instantly, without asking you.
That automatic correction, that's what we're diving into today, isn't it? This underlying structure.
It really is. It's the core principle. We're aiming to look at the, let's call it the geometry of awareness, moving past the content, the specific anxiety, the relationship issue, to see the scaffolding it's all built on.
So it's not about fixing the outside world.
No, not primarily. It's about seeing the silent editor inside, understanding how this editing process, which is necessary for speed, also becomes the source of our biggest distortions. It's about understanding Gestalt, the sort of physics of how we shape reality.
Okay, so our mission today is to get a handle on how this psychological architecture dictates, well, almost everything. Why we get triggered, why we get stuck in conflicts. And
maybe, just maybe, how we could reorganize our perception to see new possibilities, how we can see our own seeing.
Okay, let's unpack this premise, because honestly, it feels really counterintuitive. I mean, I walk outside, I feel the sun, I look at a tree. It feels like I'm taking it all in, the whole moment.
That feeling of presence, of totality, is incredibly compelling, but it's part of the elegance of the system. The truth is, you likely didn't register the exact play of light on every single leaf, did you?
No, probably not.
Or the precise density of the air, the infinite chaotic detail of just raw sensory input. What you perceived was tree.
Right. Tree or sunny day.
Or you saw some movement and your brain instantly labeled it river. It's relentlessly efficient. Doesn't give you the raw, overwhelming film of reality. That would be, well, just too much, too slow to process.
So it gives us the summary instead, the highlights reel.
Exactly. The trailer, not the full movie. And that distinction is everything.
When you put it like that, yeah. If I think of Apple, I see the general idea, the archetype. But I'm not automatically seeing if it's shiny or dull, or if there's a tiny bruise on one side, or what it's sitting on.
The concept arrives before the specific details. The symbol overrides the substance, you could say, because the concept is usually enough to navigate the world quickly.
And you're saying this isn't a bug, it's a feature.
Absolutely, it's a design choice. This filtering, this constant cutting down of the world's complexity is essential for rapid response, for, not getting eaten, historically speaking.
Makes sense.
But the cost of that efficiency is abstraction. The brain focuses on carving out the necessary shapes, the boundaries, the figures. And in doing that, it automatically, elegantly just hides countless other details from us.
Which I guess brings us squarely to Gestalt. We need to nail down this concept because it sounds like it's the key to this whole deep dive.
It really is foundational. The classic definition you hear is, the whole is other than the sum of its parts. And I really want to emphasize that word, other.
Not greater than. I feel like I've heard that more often.
People often say greater, but other is more precise, I think. It's not necessarily better or bigger, it's fundamentally transformed. When the parts come together to form a whole, their nature changes. The relationship between them creates something new.
Okay, that distinction feels important. It implies the structure itself imposes a kind of reality. It's not just adding pieces together.
Precisely. The mind doesn't build reality pixel by pixel from the bottom up. That's too slow, too cumbersome. It works top down.
Top down.
It starts with a guess, essentially, an expectation, a pre-existing pattern, a likely structure, and then it actively sculpts the incoming sensory data to fit that framework.
Wow, okay.
And that is what we can call the first deception, the illusion of raw input. We walk around believing we're objective recorders, but we're actually highly subjective sculptors. The mind prioritizes coherence, A stable picture over comprehensive accuracy. Every single time.
So it expects threat. It emphasizes data confirming threat and ignores safety signals.
Pretty much. Or it sees love and just smooths over the typos like in our earlier example. The coherent story wins.
So perception isn't passive reception. It's more like an active process of confirming an internal hypothesis about structure.
You've got it. And that structural hypothesis, that determines what we focus on. And crucially, what becomes invisible to us.
Right. So to understand this structural editing, we absolutely need to talk about the figure-ground relationship. This is the operational heart of Gestalt psychology.
Figure ground, okay.
Perception is never just flat or neutral. It's always structured into this dynamic pair.
Yeah.
There's the figure, which is the thing that pops out, that grabs your attention.
The main event.
Exactly. And then there's the ground, which is everything else. The background, the context, the stuff that recedes.
So if we're all looking at the same scene, the same field as you call it, what decides what becomes the figure? Why do I notice one thing and you notice something else? It can't just be random.
It's definitely not random. The brain selects the figure based on immediate personal relevance. Not objective size or importance in the grand scheme of things, but relevance to you right now.
And what makes something relevant? Well, think of it as a triangle. One corner is basic survival needs: threat, food, shelter. Another corner is emotional investment, things we care deeply about: love, fear. And the third corner, especially powerful today, is ego involvement.
Ego involvement. Okay, that resonates. Let's use a modern example like that social media tightness test.
Perfect example.
You're scrolling through your phone, just passively consuming, and boom, a picture pops up. A friend, an acquaintance maybe, celebrating something big, new house, fancy trip, promotion.
Champagne, ocean view.
Yeah.
Works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And instantly you feel it, right? That little clench in the chest, comparison kicks in, maybe a feeling of lack, or I should be doing that.
In that split second, your brain, driven by ego relevance, how does this reflect on me? It locks onto the figure. Their success, capital T, capital S.
Right.
And that figure gets processed through a filter that might say, this highlights my own inadequacy, or this proves I'm falling behind.
Yeah.
Those few pixels on the screen are instantly inflated into this dominant, sometimes painful mental object.
And the ground just vanishes.
Completely. The ground contains all the context, doesn't it? The years of struggle, maybe, the huge mortgage payment on that house, the sleepless nights, the arguments, the fact that the vacation photo captured the only sunny hour in a rainy week.
All the complexity, the background truth.
Erased, because it's not relevant to the immediate ego-driven figure that just grabbed you. And that erasure, that selective focus, is the second deception: blindness to the ground.
Wow, the ground is 99% of reality, you're saying. But we live based on the 1% figure our brain highlights.
Often, yes. It's a startlingly selective way to experience the world, driven by emotional charge.
It forces us into this.
Yeah.
Selective, emotionally loaded reality. And to really hammer this home, there's that classic study, right? The gorilla experiment.
Ah, the invisible gorilla. A perfect illustration of this selective blindness, or inattentional blindness, as they call it.
Can you walk us through that quickly?
Sure. Participants watch a video and are given a very specific task. Count the number of basketball passes made by players wearing white shirts. It requires pretty intense focus.
Okay, I'm picturing it. Focusing hard on the white shirts, counting passes.
Exactly. And while you're doing that, someone in a full-body gorilla suit walks right into the middle of the players, stops, thumps their chest, and then walks off screen. It's not subtle.
A gorilla? You'd think that would be impossible to miss.
You would. But the staggering result is that roughly half of the people intensely focused on counting the passes completely failed to see the gorilla. They have no memory of it afterward.
Half? That's incredible. So it wasn't hidden.
Not physically hidden at all. Their minds literally rendered it invisible because their attention, their figure, was locked on to counting those passes. Everything else became irrelevant ground, including a chest-thumping gorilla.
That really shows how selection is distortion, doesn't it?
Profoundly. When the brain locks onto a figure, it doesn't just ignore the ground, it actively suppresses it. So if your figure is your worry about a deadline or feeling slighted by someone,
then the ground, which might contain opportunities, solutions, the beauty of the moment, a friend needing help, just gets edited out.
it gets edited out of your perceived reality. Which leads to that terrifying thought, doesn't it? How many crucial gorillas walk through our lives every day?
Yeah. A subtle facial expression in a negotiation, a sign a loved one is struggling, maybe even a simple solution staring us in the face.
But we miss them entirely because our internal spotlight is locked onto some consuming worry or plan or feeling of lack.
So the structural insight here is when we feel stuck, like we can't see a way out, it might just mean our field of vision is incredibly narrow, dictated by one obsessive figure.
That's often exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
We're mistaking the figure for the entire field. Okay, so we know the brain selects a figure and ignores the ground, but why is it so compelled to do this, often so rigidly? This brings us deeper into the engine driving this editing process. It's a core Gestalt principle called pregnance.
Pregnance, okay, what does that mean?
It roughly translates to the law of good form, or simplicity, or maybe good closure. Essentially, the mind has a fundamental aversion to fragmentation, uncertainty, ambiguity. It structurally craves wholeness, stability, completion.
It wants things neat and tidy.
Exactly. It constantly seeks the simplest, most stable, most coherent structure possible, even if that structure isn't actually accurate, or is even harmful in the long run.
That sounds potentially problematic, like the root of anxiety, maybe? Or even rigid thinking ideologically, that inability to tolerate the gray areas.
It's absolutely connected. Think about that feeling, that itch of the unresolved. That's what Gestalt calls an open Gestalt, an incomplete pattern.
Give me some examples.
Well, small scale. That song's stuck in your head. Often it's looping because of an unresolved chord or a line you can't quite remember. The brain is just cycling, trying to find the completion, the symmetry.
Okay, yeah, I get that. Annoying, but makes sense.
Now scale that up to our lives. Think about the big open Gestalts we carry. The argument you never finished with your parent. The apology you desperately needed but never got. That dream job you walked away from too soon.
Oof. Yeah, those feel heavy, like background tension.
They are internal tension. Because they're incomplete structures. And because the brain demands resolution, that's pregnance driving it. It will take dramatic, often unhelpful shortcuts to force closure.
How does it force closure if the external situation hasn't changed?
It doesn't wait for genuine truth or difficult conversations or emotional processing. That's too slow, too uncertain. Instead, it uses internal tools, projection, and assumption. It slams the narrative shut prematurely.
It fills in the blanks itself.
Precisely. It closes the loop with stories like, well, they obviously never cared about me, or see, the world is fundamentally unfair, or it was impossible anyway, I'm just not capable.
This sounds like what you called phantom closures. We tell ourselves a story, even a painful one, just to stop the discomfort of the open question.
Exactly. The closure, even if it's a complete fabrication built on self-defense or fear, feels structurally more stable, more bearable than the ongoing openness which demands vulnerability and sitting with uncertainty.
And this drive for closure, it affects what we pay attention to.
It absolutely governs our attention, which leads to a really chilling realization. Our attention isn't truly free. This is the third deception, substituting assumption for experience. The brain prefers a comforting lie to a structurally fragmented truth.
I always thought, I choose what to look at, I choose what problem to focus on, but you're saying it's more like something is pulling my attention.
Your attention isn't primarily directed by conscious, rational will. It's often magnetized by your unfinished business, by the gravity of your open, unresolved gestalts.
Magnetized? How so?
When you walk into a room, you might think you're just scanning around, but your attention will likely snap onto the person or the situation that somehow resonates with the wound you're trying to heal, the rejection you're still processing, the failure you fear repeating, or even the task you're avoiding.
So my attention is drawn to whatever holds the key to completing that old, painful pattern.
In many cases, yes. It's a profound lack of freedom, often masked by the feeling of choice. We are structurally pulled toward the figure that represents the tension we haven't yet resolved.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Let's say you have a deep-seated, perhaps unconscious belief that you're not competent. An open gestalt around your worth.
Right.
When you're at work, your attention filter, driven by this need to close the "am I competent" loop, will likely skim right over praise or positive feedback. It doesn't hold the necessary tension.
It's not relevant to the open question.
Exactly. But let one tiny piece of criticism come your way, even constructive criticism, and bam. Your attention locks onto it, it magnifies it, because that criticism contains the structural tension needed to engage with and potentially close, that core wound about competence. Even if closing it means confirming the negative belief.
Wow. So the pattern perpetuates itself through where we direct our focus.
Okay, so pregnance is the engine driving us toward closure, forcing assumptions. Now let's look at the map this engine draws onto the world. This involves a concept called isomorphism. It's maybe the deepest mechanism we'll discuss today.
Isomorphism sounds complex.
It just means same shape or same structure. The core idea is that the structure of your inner world Your dominant emotions, your unresolved tensions, your habitual patterns directly shapes and mirrors the structure of your outer perception.
Whoa, hang on. So you're saying what I perceive as reality out there is actually just my inner state projected outwards and dressed up.
In a profound way, yes, that's a good way to put it. Let's go back to that sunset test we mentioned earlier.
Right, two people looking at the same sunset.
Exactly the same physical field of light, color, clouds. One person experiences awe, beauty, connection, maybe possibility. The other feels a crushing sense of finality, loss, maybe loneliness.
And the sun itself didn't change. Objectively, the photons are the same.
Precisely. What changed was the inner field, the internal structure of each person's consciousness. One person's structure might have been open, calm, receptive to wonder. The other structure might have been dominated by unresolved grief, anxiety, or disappointment.
So the sadness didn't just, like, tint the sunset gray.
It does more than tint it. It fundamentally reorganizes the perceived field. Sadness can make the space between the clouds feel heavy, oppressive. It makes the fading light feel symbolic of loss. It ensures that the relationship between the elements in the scene mirrors the internal tension. That's isomorphism. Structure mirrors structure. Tension projects tension.
Okay, the implications for just daily interactions are huge here. If I walk into a meeting feeling insecure, that's my inner structure.
Right.
Then that insecurity is going to organize how I see everything in that room. I'll interpret neutral feedback as a criticism. I'll read my colleague's quietness as judgment.
Very likely. You'll experience what we can call the fourth deception, seeing memory, not presence. You aren't actually perceiving the objective reality of the meeting room in that moment. You're perceiving the meeting as filtered through and structured by every single past experience where you felt inadequate or judged.
So the world didn't suddenly become threatening.
Your inner landscape shifted towards anxiety, and your perception instantly followed suit, projecting that threat structure onto the external world and disguising it as objective reality. Loneliness makes the world feel empty. Anxiety makes it feel dangerous.
This raises a really tricky question, though. If my perception is so heavily shaped by my inner state, how can I ever tell the difference between a genuine external threat, like a real danger, and just my own anxiety projecting? Is there ever an objective river I can trust?
That is the absolute core challenge of developing self-awareness, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The river, the external reality, always flows, but your perception of its beauty, its danger, its meaning, that flows directly from your internal state.
So how do we differentiate?
One clue lies in the structure itself. Genuine external threats often have a more stable, consistent structure that can be, to some extent, verified by others. Isomorphic projections, however, tend to shift and change depending on your internal emotional weather. Others might look at the same situation and have a completely different read. They don't feel the rejection or danger you feel.
Because they have a different internal structure mapping onto it.
Exactly. So we're not seeing the world in itself. We're seeing our relationship to the world, a relationship dictated by our history, our wounds, our expectations. Those wounds literally act as filters, shaping everything.
So the goal isn't to somehow magically remove the filter because we have to make meaning, we need structure.
Right, we need structure.
But the goal is to become aware of the filter, to understand its composition, its biases.
Precisely. To stop being the unconscious victim of the story your filter tells, and to become the conscious witness to the storyteller, to see the structure itself. And this leads us to the truly revolutionary moment in this kind of awareness work, the experience of insight.
Insight, okay. What is insight in this Gestalt framework? It's not just learning a new fact, right?
Not at all. Insight isn't about adding more information into the existing structure. It is the structural reorganization itself. It's that moment when the whole pattern shifts.
How does that happen?
It happens when we stop fighting the content of the perception, arguing with the figure, trying to fix the other person, blaming the world, and we start looking at the field itself, the structure, the frame holding the picture.
So we pivot, we stop asking the usual question, what is this thing out there?
And instead, we start asking the truly powerful, revolutionary question. What in me is organizing this moment to appear this way?
That shifts the focus entirely inward.
Completely. It moves from reaction, feeling like a victim of circumstance, to responsibility, the ability to respond from awareness.
So instead of why is my boss ignoring my ideas?
The question becomes, what pattern in me, perhaps related to visibility or worth, is organizing this interaction as being ignored?
Or instead of why is this project so overwhelming and impossible?
It's what unresolved gestalt of past failure or fear of inadequacy is structuring this present task as impossible.
This reframing, it brings all the power back to the internal editor, doesn't it? Back to the self. It suggests the capacity for change is right here, within our own field of vision.
Exactly. And the actual experience of insight, when it happens, often feels instantaneous, almost geometric. I like using the kaleidoscope analogy.
Okay, tell me about that.
Imagine staring into a kaleidoscope for years. You see the same intricate repeating pattern, maybe red triangles, blue diamonds, whatever, and you become convinced that this specific pattern is reality. It's fixed. If you want change, you think you have to painstakingly reach in and move each tiny piece of colored glass.
Which feels exhausting and maybe impossible.
Right, but true insight, in the Gestalt sense, isn't moving the pieces. It's simply turning the tube, even just slightly. The pieces of glass, the basic facts, the external situation, the emotions involved, they remain exactly the same. But the structure, the relationship between those pieces is instantly and completely transformed.
And suddenly you see entirely new patterns, new shapes, new possibilities using the exact same elements.
Precisely. Possibilities and solutions that were literally invisible within the old structure a moment before. That's the magic. The power isn't primarily in changing the external world. It's in changing our relationship to the structure of our perception.
We gain freedom by noticing the frame, not just the picture.
By noticing the boundaries and assumptions within which our thoughts and feelings arise, rather than getting lost in fighting the thoughts themselves. It's about learning to tolerate that open gestalt, that uncertainty, just long enough for the field to spontaneously reorganize itself into something new and more fluid.
Okay, this structural understanding really changes the game. It means these deceptions or lies we've been talking about, they weren't like moral failures or mistakes we need to beat ourselves up over.
Not at all. They were, and perhaps still are in some ways, necessary scaffolding. They helped us survive, make sense of things, feel safe when we felt vulnerable. They served a function.
But now, maybe, that scaffolding has become a kind of prison, limiting our view.
Exactly. So the work isn't about tearing down the structure violently, but about understanding it so well that we can turn those walls into doorways. We can use the awareness of the deception as the very path to greater consciousness.
Okay, so how do we make this practical? How do we turn these 5 structural lies into actual invitations for awareness in daily life? Let's really break these down.
Absolutely. This is where we put the theory into practice, interrupting that automatic editing loop. Let's detail these 5 portals. Portal 1. Recognizing the illusion of wholeness. This is that big, overarching deception driven by pregnance, the deep conviction that we see the full, complete, accurate picture right now. It protects us from feeling overwhelmed by the infinite, the unstructured.
Okay, so the deception is thinking, I see it all. What's the invitation?
The invitation is to actively look for the seams. We have to consciously cultivate skepticism about our own certainty. Ask yourself, okay, what might be missing here? What's being conveniently edited out of this picture? What detail am I ignoring because it doesn't fit my preferred narrative?
So it's about intentionally puncturing that feeling of completeness, looking for the edge of the frame.
Yes, interrupting the conviction that the figure you see is the whole field. Portal 2. Addressing blindness to the ground. This is where we fail to see the context, the background, the environment, because we're laser focused on that one emotionally charged figure, the problem, the person, the perceived slight. Remember, the function is often devotion to unfinished business.
Right, locked on the figure, so the invitation must be
to deliberately widen the lens. This requires an intentional shift, sometimes even a physical one. If you're stuck on a problem figure, a difficult email, a mistake you made, a worry, consciously pull your attention back. Look around the room, notice your breathing, ask, what else is true right now? What resources do I have? What's the bigger picture here? What context am I ignoring?
It's like forcing your brain to acknowledge the 99% again, not just the 1% figure.
Exactly. And it can feel difficult because the brain wants to stay locked on that point of tension. So you have to consciously acknowledge that pull and then intentionally create a broader frame. See the whole forest, not just the one tree that looks like it's falling. Portal 3. Managing the urge to complete the incomplete. This is that powerful drive we talked about, the brain's hatred of open gestalts, leading it to rush to closure with assumptions and projections just to feel done with it. The function is that deep craving for safety and certainty.
Yeah, filling the gap with a story. What's the counter move, the invitation here?
This one is profound and often profoundly uncomfortable. Sit in the unknown. It's the practice of consciously resisting that urge to jump to conclusions, to fill the silence, to make assumptions.
How do you actually do that when the anxiety kicks in?
You notice the feeling, that urge, that tension, and you literally say to yourself, maybe even out loud, I don't know right now, or I'm choosing not to assume. You allow the discomfort of ambiguity to just be there. Let it breathe without immediately trying to extinguish it with a potentially false story.
So you're trusting that truth or clarity might emerge from holding the space open rather than forcing it shut.
Exactly. It's realizing the temporary pain of the open loop might be far less damaging than the long-term consequences of closing it with a lie or a projection. It teaches patience over premature certainty. Portal 4. Overcoming blindness to figure shift. This is about perceptual rigidity. We get stuck on one interpretation of a person, a situation, or even ourselves, even when new evidence comes along. Why? Because our very identity might feel tied up in that old story, that familiar figure. Letting the figure shift might feel like questioning who we are.
We get loyal to our interpretation. Okay, so the invitation
is to consciously let perception be fluid, actively challenge the structure that feels solid and fixed. The mental exercise here is powerful. Ask, what if the opposite of my current interpretation were true right now? What evidence would support that opposite view? What would I have to let go of to see that?
It's like forcing the kaleidoscope to turn, even if you like the current pattern.
Precisely. What new figure, what new understanding might be trying to emerge that my loyalty to the old narrative is preventing me from seeing? This is crucial in relationships, right? We keep seeing the partner from 10 years ago, structured by memory.
Instead of the person actually here now. Allowing fluidity means letting the past rest and seeing the present as potentially new.
That's the core of it. And finally, Portal 5. Interrupting the illusion of seeing memory, not presence. This is isomorphism, playing out moment to moment, where historical patterns, old runes, and past experiences constantly structure our present perception. We project our internal state outward.
So we're reacting to ghosts, essentially. What's the invitation here?
The invitation is to actively interrupt the pattern through grounding. This means intentionally bringing yourself into the physical reality of the present moment to break the automatic link between past emotional tension and current sensory input.
Like practical steps.
Breathe deeply. Feel your feet firmly on the floor. Name 3 things you can see right now. Then ask the structural question. Is this current moment truly organizing itself as threatening, rejecting, overwhelming? Or is my historical anxiety wound imposing that structure onto it? You consciously try to let the past rest, just for this moment, to see what else might be possible now.
Okay, so these 5 portals, they show that the goal isn't to eliminate these structures, but to become conscious operators of them.
Exactly. Organization can be reorganized. Awareness doesn't just correct the picture, it transforms the entire field of perception. Hashtag outro. If we can leave you with one final image to hold on to, perhaps think about your perception like a snow globe.
Okay.
For years, maybe, we've been shaking that snow globe violently. We watch all the internal snow thoughts, feelings, worries swirling around in chaos. And we're utterly convinced that the storm, the turbulence, the problem is out there in the scene we're looking at through the glass.
Right. The world feels chaotic.
But the insight from this deep dive is realizing the storm isn't primarily out there. It's largely contained within the globe itself, within our own perceptual field. The agitation is in our hand, in how we are holding and structuring our view.
That's a powerful shift. So the purpose here wasn't to find some way to see reality perfectly or objectively.
No, that might even be impossible for meaning-making creatures like us. The purpose is to become intimately familiar with our own truth-making process, to see the structures as structures. And when you see the structure, you often glimpse the deep human longing beneath it, the need for safety, for connection, for resolution, for worth that was driving the distortion in the first place.
So the distortions aren't flaws, they're like clues. Fingerprints pointing back to our core needs.
Beautifully put. They guide you back home to understand yourself more deeply. Remember the gorilla. It wasn't hidden from the world. You were hidden from the gorilla by the intensity of your focus. These deceptions aren't your prison walls. They are the unique, sometimes challenging path of your initiation into more conscious seeing.
So the final thought for everyone listening. Maybe choose just one moment today. Could be a small frustration, a flicker of anxiety, a disagreement.
And instead of immediately reacting to the content, what was said, what happened, just pause. Try to notice the structure. What figure instantly popped out for you? What ground vanished? Was there an urge to jump to a conclusion to close the loop?
Just let that structural question hang in the air. What gestalt, what pattern is organizing this field for me right now?
Because the amazing thing is, the moment you stop fighting the figure, the problem, the person, the feeling you're obsessed with, and simply witness the structure, the ground begins to stir. The rigidity starts to soften. Awareness doesn't have to correct anything. Its presence alone transforms the arrangement.
We are not broken systems needing fixing. We are dynamic fields, constantly becoming. The field is always waiting. Perhaps the invitation is just to step into that gap sometimes, the space between what feels like fixed reality and what your structural history insists must be true.